Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I am posting an extra video in honor of Valentine's Day. So yeah, this is called Everything That I Am. This is a Go Rush fic. And yeah, this is chapter 1 called Not This Time. Fic Summary. Yuudias looked at him, eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "You left me again. I found you, and you went to the fountain." Zwijo felt something crack inside himself, and then he was falling, but he could only focus on Yuudias. "I won't leave him again," his mind whispered, and this time he couldn't help but agree wholeheartedly. This is a Yuudias time travel AU, so let's jump into the first chapter. Zwijo! As he remembered yelling, pleading for him to come back, he clenched his fist. "Not this time," he silently vowed to himself. He took off running, easily outpacing the twins even in his human form, and activated his gavel charge the moment he was out of sight. He'd made sure that it was functioning, and now it helped him jump onto the roof quicker than he would have been able to had it not been working. The older Valgyarian drew up short, surprise flashing in his eyes as Yuudias landed in front of him. "You're faster than I remember," he commented, then straightened when he no doubt saw the seriousness in the blue-haired man's eyes. "No, not just faster. Something's different about you." "Zwijo," he replied, stepping forward. "There are things we must discuss in private. Even here, it's not safe." The blonde tilted his head slightly. "Oh? Do you not trust the humans you were with just now? You seem to be quite friendly." Yuudias sighed, allowing the bone-deep exhaustion to show ever so slightly in his posture. "It has nothing to do with trust. I trust them with my life, if it comes down to it. But they have no part in this, at least not yet, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as feasibly possible." Zwijo studied him carefully, clearly trying to pick out what he was talking about. "If you keep secrets from your allies, then I should have no place in your circle." The younger man shook his head slightly, a small smile making his way onto its face as he spoke in a quiet voice. "If I cannot trust my partner with everything that I am, then I trust nobody, Moonlight." Zwijo drew in a sharp breath at both the implications and the nickname, and Yuudias held out a hand. "Come, let's talk." A hand reached for his, fitting perfectly as if it was meant to be there, and Yuudias smiled truly for the first time in who knows how long. Zwijo was back. Though he didn't know everything yet, he soon would, and then he and his partner could fix everything. Together. As Yuudias led them to a location he didn't recognize, Zwijo watched him carefully. Their hands were still joined. The younger Valgyarian had, seemingly unconsciously, laced their fingers together, and the blonde tried to ignore the feeling of rightness that had settled over him when that had happened. But more importantly, Yuudias was different. He almost seemed like a completely different person, but his instincts were screaming at him to trust him, that he was safe, and Zwijo had learned to never ignore his instincts. He would go along with whatever this was, at least until he got a proper explanation. "He called me his partner. Moonlight, he called me," his mind whispered, and he silently yelled at it to shut up. Yuudias stopped before a stand of trees and subtly glanced around, confirming that the coast was clear before kneeling to open a hidden hatch in the ground. Zwijo's eyes widened as he was tugged forward, and the other man finally let go of his hand so they could climb down the ladder, Yuudias closing and locking the hatch behind them. When they reached the bottom, he was guided forward about 10 steps. There was the sound of a switch being flipped, and then something like a door closing and locking between them and the ladder they had just descended. Zwijo tensed instinctively, but felt Yuudias squeeze his hand, and he calmed ever so slightly. He relaxed more once the lights came on a few seconds later, eyes widening as he looked around at the expansive setup. His thought process was cut off by the younger Valgyarian, now back in his original form, suddenly pulling him into a tight hug, and he startled, turning to him in surprise. "Yuudias?" he questioned, and that's when he realized that the other man was shaking. One arm instinctively came up to wrap around him, the other remaining by his sword, and he pulled Yuudias closer. The part of his brain that had been cultivated through long years in the battlefield screamed at him to pull away, to not let someone within striking distance when he wasn't sure of their intentions, but the other, louder part of him screamed to comfort the younger man. "Yuudias?" he asked again, and received a small nod in response. "Sorry, Moonlight. I just need a moment." Yuudias had his face buried in Zwijo's chest, so his voice was muffled, but the older Valgyrian heard him all the same. "There it is again," he thought. "That's the second time you've used that name," he commented lightly. And Yuudias was still hiding his face, but Zwijo could somehow sense that he was embarrassed. He chuckled softly, finally bringing his hand up to place on the younger man's head, but stopping before he could go through with the motion. What was he doing today? He saw Yuudias again, but he was different, and now Zwijo was acting without thinking. What was happening? The blue-haired man finally pulled back from the hug a few minutes later, seeming to have mostly calmed down. "Sorry," he apologized again, moving to sit on a nearby couch and motioning for Zwijo to join him. "It's been a long time." As the blonde walked closer, he heard Yuudias mutter, "Longer than you know." "What was that?" he asked, and the younger Valgyrian sighed, sinking back into the couch with a weariness that seemed to permeate his entire being. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane, but I promise I'm not lying and I'm not crazy, okay?" Zwijo studied him for a few moments before nodding. "I'll hear you out," he said, making no promise that he would believe him, but willing to listen, if only because it was Yuudias and because he needed some sort of explanation for whatever was happening. Yuudias took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I traveled back in time to stop a war. Not the one you know, but a new, much more dangerous one. When I left..." He trailed off, and Zwijo could see the pain in his eyes. "When I left, the twins and I were the only ones left. Well, Damu was there too, but I think they were taken as I was sent back. Everyone else was gone." His eyes were shimmering, as if he was about to cry. "I promised..." His voice broke, and Zwijo could see that he was actually crying now. "I promised to find you again." The blonde's eyes widened, his chest felt tight, and suddenly he was moving, placing his hands on Yuudias' shoulders and turning the younger man towards him. Yuudias looked at him, eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "You left me again. I found you, and you went to the fountain." Zwijo felt something crack inside himself, and then he was falling, but he could only focus on Yuudias. Yuudias, who had always admired him so much, and who had pushed him to keep going even when he felt like a failure. Yuudias, who he had seen the potential in all that time ago, and immediately known he needed him at his side. Yuudias, who had always stayed by his side as much as he was able, and who he had always sought out in return. Yuudias, who had seen death and horror and more war than anyone should have to, and still somehow wasn't corrupted by it. Yuudias, who had traveled back in time to find him, only to watch him die again, and then had to wait, alone, for decades before he returned. "I won't leave him again," his mind whispered, and this time he couldn't help but agree wholeheartedly. And that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the first chapter of this new fic, and I will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.